They said she was confused, too old to understand what was happening. But I knew better. She wasn't confused. She was being erased by her own children. They took her house, her savings, her silence. Everyone acted like it was normal, but I watched it happen. And I wasn't just a girl anymore. I was the only one who saw the truth. And I was going to make them pay. My name is Amira. I was 16 when I realized my family wasn't a family, but a cage. My grandmother Lele was the only softness in our home. She didn't speak much, but when she did, the air seemed to hold its breath. Her voice was gentle, deliberate, the kind that made you feel like she meant every word. Everyone else treated her like wallpaper except me. She raised me, not out of duty, but out of love. While my parents chased titles, clients, and cocktail parties, she stayed home. Made my school lunch, brushed my hair, warmed my hands when I had nightmares. She gave me her time, and I didn't even realize back then how rare that was. But my parents, they saw her as an inconvenience. They smiled at her in front of guests, took photos for social media, called her our precious matriarch, then left her alone in her room for hours, days, sometimes longer. It started subtly. Her favorite necklace disappeared. The one she wore every Nowruz, probably misplaced, they said. Then it was her pension. We'll manage it for her, my father announced. She gets confused with numbers. She didn't get confused. They just didn't want her to see what they were doing. Next. The house, the very house she built with my grandfather's bare hands, was signed over to my father for tax reasons. They told her, and she believed them at least. She acted like she did. She stopped humming when she watered the plants. She stopped sitting at the head of the table. She stopped smiling when I brought her tea. But I always noticed. One evening, I saw her in the laundry room, holding a photo of her wedding day. Her lips trembled, but no tears came. When I stepped in, she looked at me, smiled, and said, "Just dust in my eyes. Dust doesn't make your hands shake." That night, I opened my laptop. I didn't sleep. Bank accounts, property records. I hacked into my parents' emails, and what I found made me sick. They'd emptied her savings, they'd sold her wedding gold, they were making plans to move her into a nursing home. One she didn't even know about. I was just a girl. But in that moment, I knew I had to become something more. I printed everything. Emails, transfers, the house deed. I kept them in a folder under my mattress labeled Science Project. Because that's what my parents never asked about. I started recording things too. Conversations, phone calls, my dad yelling at Lele for leaving a light on. My mom telling her, "You should be grateful we let you stay." Let her stay. It was her house. The more I learned, the harder it was to look them in the eye. But I had to. I had to act normal. Because the next thing they planned would be final. They wanted to send her away. To a facility 2 towns over. The kind where people forget your name before you do. I waited until the night they left for a weekend trip. Corporate retreat. They called it. I told Lele we were having a movie night. She smiled weakly, like it was the first smile she had forced in weeks. But she didn't know what I had planned. That night, I called a lawyer, one I found through a women's rights foundation. I told her everything. She didn't laugh. She didn't say I was too young. She said, "You're doing the right thing. Let's get to work." Over the next 3 weeks, we built a case. Quietly, carefully, legally. Turns out, elder financial abuse is hard to prove unless you know what to look for. And I did. The moment I turned 17, I filed a motion to have Lele's power of attorney reassessed. I had the recordings, the signed documents, even a note Lele once scribbled in her diary. "I'm scared they'll forget I exist while I'm still here." When the papers were served, my parents exploded. My father shouted, "Things I'll never forget." My mother sobbed, told me I was ruining the family, said I was manipulated by an old woman who didn't know what she was doing. But Lele, she stood up. For the first time in years, she stood straight and tall and said, "I may be old, but I am not blind." They went quiet. For once, they had no words. The court date was set for a Thursday morning. It felt surreal. Me, a teenager, walking beside my grandmother into a courtroom to challenge her own children. My own parents. Lele held my hand. Her grip was firm. Her knuckles, thin as paper, trembled slightly. But her eyes, they burned with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Pride. The judge, a woman in her 50s, listened carefully. She asked questions, reviewed the folder I'd put together. Each page, each email, each bank statement, evidence of betrayal disguised as care. My parents showed up with smiles and rehearsed concern. "She's confused." My mother said she forgets things. My father added, "We're just protecting her from herself." But when the judge turned to Laylee and asked if she understood what was happening, she nodded and replied with a voice that silenced the room. I may forget what I had for breakfast, but I'll never forget how they made me feel like I didn't matter. The judge leaned back. She didn't need more. A court-appointed financial advocate was assigned. The power of attorney was removed from my parents and placed under neutral supervision, with me allowed as a secondary overseer once I've turned 18. The house was frozen from sale. Any withdrawals from Layla's accounts were blocked pending investigation. It wasn't complete justice, but it was the beginning of one. My parents didn't speak to me for weeks. They called me brainwashed. Said I'd been manipulated by an old woman who was losing her grip on reality. But I knew better. She hadn't lost her grip. They had simply underestimated how tightly she could hold on. After the hearing, Laylee and I sat in the garden she once cared for before they let it die. I brought back the jasmine plants, the mint she loved for tea, a lemon tree, just a sapling. She touched the leaves like she was blessing them, and then she said something I'll never forget. I thought I had no one left, but God gave me you. We settled into a quieter life. I dropped out of the noise. Less social media, fewer fake friends. No more pretending to belong to a family that fed off silence and called it peace. Laylee and I built something else. Real conversations. Slow. Mornings, the smell of cardamom tea filling the kitchen again. I listened to her stories, not the ones she told as bedtime tales, but the ones she used to keep hidden behind her eyes. Stories of growing up in a village with no roads, of hiding her school books under her scarf because girls weren't allowed to read, of meeting my grandfather when she was 16 and marrying him by 17, of losing a child she never spoke about, of holding this family together with sheer willpower, and then watching it turn cold around her. One afternoon, as I was organizing her closet, I found an old wooden box tucked beneath folded linens. Inside were things she'd never mentioned. A faded newspaper clipping of her university graduation, something my parents never knew she had, a lock of hair tied in a ribbon, and a sealed envelope with my name on it. The envelope was dated 5 years earlier. Inside was a handwritten letter. If you're reading this, it means you saw what I couldn't say aloud. I want you to know I always knew what they were doing, what they thought of me. I let them believe I was fragile because I didn't want to fight anymore. I had nothing left until you started watching, until you started listening. You are stronger than I ever was. And that is my peace. Not revenge, just knowing that someone finally sees me. And I see you. I always have. Love, Grandma Laylee. I held the letter for a long time. There was no rage in her words, no bitterness, just truth and release. A month later, my parents moved out of the house. The court order gave Laylee full rights to decide who lived in her home, and she chose peace. She didn't throw them out with fire or fury. She simply told them, you may take your things, but you cannot stay where love no longer lives. They left without looking back. Maybe they never truly belonged there, but I did. In time, Laylee's health began to fade. Her hands got slower, her steps smaller, but her mind stayed sharp, her humor soft, but sharp enough to make me laugh on even the heaviest days. She passed away 2 weeks before my high school graduation. Not in a hospital, not in a care home, in her own bed, in the house she had built, protected, lost, and reclaimed, with jasmine blooming by the window at the funeral. My parents wore black. They cried, but they didn't speak, because everyone there knew who had really stood by her, who had fought for her. A year later, I stood before a small crowd, strangers, mostly at a local community event. I had started a nonprofit in her name, Laylee House, legal support for elderly women facing financial abuse from their own families. I shared her story, not with anger, but with purpose. I ended with the words she once gave me. In that old letter, you don't have to shout to be heard, but you must never stay silent when silence is a lie. They took everything from my grandma, her voice, her home. Her dignity. But they forgot one thing. They left her granddaughter behind. And I remembered everything. It's been 8 years since Laylee died, and not a single day has passed where I haven't heard her voice in my head. Not the one that told bedtime stories or asked if I'd eaten. I mean the voice she left behind, the one that taught me how to carry grief like a second heartbeat. After she was gone, I moved out of the house for a while. I couldn't sleep in a place so full of her absence. Every corner felt like it was waiting for her to come back, so I left. I packed a single suitcase, took her journal, and moved into a small student room in the city. I didn't keep the house empty. THOUGHI turned it into a shelter. At first, it was just an idea, something I scribbled on a napkin at a train station. A safe place for the forgotten. That's what I wrote. But ideas are like seeds. They don't need much to grow, just truth, pain, and a reason. So I named it after her, Lele House. It wasn't fancy. Just 3 rooms, 2 beds in each, a small kitchen, and an old bookshelf full of donated paperbacks. But it gave women, older women, the ones no one writes about, somewhere to go when they had no one left. One woman came in after her son tried to sell her house while she was hospitalized. Another had been used as free childcare by her daughter for 10 years and kicked out when she asked for a day off. Some couldn't remember the last time someone spoke to them with kindness, but they came, and they stayed, and slowly, they started to speak. Some of them sat in silence for days. Others talked too much, like they were trying to make up for years of being ignored. All of them reminded me of her, pieces of Lele scattered in different forms. The quiet ones, the fierce ones, the ones who never stopped apologizing for simply existing. I didn't become a lawyer. I didn't need to. I became a listener. That was enough, and when I could, I became a witness. Because silence is a language, too, and someone has to translate. When I turned 25, I got an email from the woman who helped me with the case years ago. The pro bono lawyer who believed me when no one else did. She wrote, Amira, I've watched from a distance. What you've built, your grandmother would be proud. We're opening a new community legal center. I want you on the board. Not for your credentials, for your experience. I said yes, and I cried. Not for the opportunity, but because I finally understood something Lele never said aloud. That love isn't always loud. It's not always neat. It's not about who shares your blood. It's about who remembers you when everyone else forgets. 2 years later, I was standing at the podium of a regional human rights conference. I was invited to speak about elder abuse, but I didn't read statistics. I told her story. I told our story. I started with the phrase she once whispered while holding a photo of her wedding day. They'll forget I ever existed. Then I paused, looked at the silent room, and added, they did, but I didn't. And now you won't either. That night, I received dozens of letters, some from strangers who said they saw their mother, grandmother, or even themselves. Her one was from a young woman. She wrote, my mom treats my grandma like a burden. I used to think that was normal. After hearing your story, I finally spoke up. She's living with me now. I think I just became her Amira. I read it 3 times. Then I placed it in Layla's old journal. There was still space between the pages. My parents, they never came back. I heard they moved to Canada. Started over. Good for them. I don't hate them anymore, but I don't miss them either. Some people think that forgiveness is about letting go, but sometimes it's about holding on, just not. To the person, to the lesson, to the line in the sand, to the choice to break the cycle. And I chose now. Every year on the day Lele passed, we host a small tea ceremony at Lele House. There's no speech, no tears, just silence. Jasmine tea. And a single empty chair with a folded letter on it. Every woman who walks through our doors is invited to write to someone who never heard them. And leave it there. Some of the letters are angry, some are soft, some are nothing but scribbled. Names, but they all end the same way. I remember, and I still care. That's what she gave me, not wealth, not power, not revenge, a voice. And I use it every day.